minute ago.
Unico presents.
Oh yeah, they did say I live in because I'm here. You know, president. Yeah, there's they're giving very fundamental.
Yeah.
Yeah, principles. Yeah, she's the best. Yeah. Always had. Well, it's funny. My husband, for example, his last student teacher was
So I see y'all on the street. Yeah.
So that was there. Did you not hear that? Did you not hear all of that?
Good morning, guys. We're going to start with our media relations part. If you could take your seats, please. Well, good morning. My name is Brandon Jones. Been at the Public Affairs Office for about 4 months now. Have an interesting background. I've spent 12 years as a broadcast journalist, TV anchor, and reporter. I've worked in Texas, North Carolina, and Ohio. So this world is totally different for me being in the military, but I'm loving it. So my job is to kind of bring that media background to this world and how we can marry the stories together. So I kind of assembled a group of people who I think can kind of better help give you some insight on what media relations is. So I'm going to let them tell a little bit about themselves and we'll go from there.
Hi everyone, my name is Bridget Grummett. I'm with the Austin American Statesman. I have worked in Florida and then also here in Texas for about 20 years in the media. And I'm on the editorial board now at the Statesman, so I write opinion pieces. But that gig started about a year ago. Prior to that, for about 5 years, I was the local news editor overseeing the local coverage at the Statesman. A lot of it was sort of local government type stuff, but certainly, other news beyond that. And then prior to that, I was a local government reporter and editor with the Tampa Times in Florida. So happy to be here and look forward to the discussion.
Good morning. My name is David Bryant. I am the military editor for the Clay Daily Herald outside of Fort Hood, Texas. My experience started in the military as public affairs. I actually deployed with the 36th Infantry Division as public affairs to Iraq back in 2010, 2011. So I have a mixture of military experience as well as the civilian experience. My primary duties is mainly to cover military and veteran affairs for the Fort Hood area. Pretty much covers most of the 3 counties, Bell County, Lampasas County, and Cordell County. We have a huge veteran population out there, a very large Guard presence. I actually happen to know a lot about the State Guard. I haven't been National Guard for so many years, so I know what it is y'all's purpose is and what y'all do. So I'm hoping I might be able to bring a little bit more of what we can do to help y'all as well to the table.
Excellent. Good morning. I have to think about what time it was. My name is Bridget Spencer. I work at Fox 7 Austin, downtown Austin. I've been here in Austin for about 4 years. Before that, I was at this little bitty station in Dothan, Alabama. It's a town nobody's ever heard of, including myself. Have you heard of Dothan? There's actually a military presence there in Enterprise, Alabama. It's kind of that area near Fort Rucker. So I kind of started covering a lot of military at that time, early in my career. But I've been here in Austin about 4 years, and my primary focus is a lot of police and crime and courts related stories. But I have a very soft spot for human interests and features, and also military. We have a whole segment that Mike Warren does called Care Force, and I don't know if you've watched Care Force. Brandon might know, but it's a touching segment. It's about once a month. And recently I went on this honor flight. So it's starting to open my eyes, and I'm educated more and more about what you all do. So whatever I can do to help you get your stories out, please help me out, because that's what I want to do.
Well, speaking of getting stories out, we know that most stories start with a story pitch. So you guys kind of tell us how they can create a good story pitch to get your attention.
Great. So yeah, as far as with the story pitch, usually it's going to be an email, but feel free to also call, reach out in person. But specifically with print media, it really helps if we get several days advance notice. It's going to be really hard to get good coverage if you reach out about something that's happening that day. But if you reach out a couple days in advance, let us know what's going on. And it helps if you can, either tie into some kind of current events in some way, like if there's a training exercise going on and it's going to be related to helping out with something going on at the border, for instance, or something else that's in the news. That really strengthens your story pitch. If you have some kind of new gizmos that you're playing with, new technology, some kind of new toy, if you will, people love stories about that, and that can kind of help pique the interest. And if there's really good human interest angle, like Bridget was saying, someone in the group that has a compelling story about their own experience, that also can really strengthen the story pitch.
And also, for Brian, like Bridget's absolutely right. If you can give us at least a few days notice, it really helps in us being able to find somebody to cover it. Also, if it's a good enough story, which y'all are doing, feel free to write the story and send it to us. As Brandon can attest, I put out a weekly paper called Forded Herald, and I pull in all kinds of stories that are of interest to our readers. And because we have such a large veteran and Guard presence in the Fort Hood area, I tend to pull a lot of Guard stories and to run in my paper. So I have no problem running your stories, you just got to give them to me. It's one of the biggest things. But if you do have something going on, especially like, say, for me in the Fort Hood area, because, it's a great place to train. And a lot of Guard units go out there and train. I don't know if the State Guard ever gets the opportunity to get out there, but if y'all do, and especially if you're training for any type of, the different disaster response. The State Guard's primary duties is disaster response. You can be helping, with the food, the water, setting up the shelters, making sure they got all that stuff taken care of. You're practicing for, say, tornado response, you're out in the area, or even if it's something that, doesn't matter where you're at, I'll take the story. I can get your story out there and let people know who you are and what you do. Because the biggest problem the State Guard has is that nobody knows who you are or what your purpose is. And so the biggest thing is for you all to get that information out, to let the rest of the state know, hey, this is who we are, this is what we do, and this is why we need you, to come volunteer as well.
Now, TV is a little different though, because it's a visual medium. So, Bridget, how can they give you a story that would be, I guess, visually interesting?
Yeah, that's a huge thing. We can't, a lot of times, my boss has this thing about, how are you going to show this? He'll say, this is a newspaper story or something. That's not what you want to be. And we know that you guys are very visual. Your training exercises, everything you do is visual. So I would love to cover more about the State Guard, because I'm still learning what you do as well. So I would say the best way to get TV attention, or the best way to get us to come out, is to make us care. Simple as that. I care, but how can you make that viewer care? What is going to attract them to watch the story? That's what we want people to do. We want them to stay tuned in and watch it. And as you were saying, this is a huge, Central Texas is full of veterans, one of the highest amount, and especially in the Fort Hood, Killeen area. People care. People respect the military here. And we don't have care for us for nothing. There are people are watching it. So if there are people that are interesting and they serve, people want to know about it, especially you all. I see everybody's kind of mixed up with National Guard in here, as well as the Texas State Guard. I just found out, you were saying, like, volunteers, like people would love to learn your stories, like why you know, what you do 9 to 5, you know, doctors, lawyers, attorneys, and the fact that you set aside time to volunteer, like that is the most honorable thing you can do, and I think people want to know that. So just make us, you know, give us a couple of days as well, notice, you know, make it visually attractive, and maybe hone in on one person or 2 people, because people like to hear people's stories. So just, yeah, TV's totally different, but it has to be visual. So we like to come out to your training exercises.
Well, you kind of touched on it a little bit, all of you did. You know, after they send the press release, how long should they wait? Should they expect an immediate response? Because sometimes it's just not possible.
Yeah, actually sometimes, you know, you might get the press release a week or 2 before. You may not immediately get the answer, but you know what? 2 days before, send it again. Hey, I'm just checking in because this is going on. There have been many times where I have looked over a press release and forgot. And then somebody followed up with me and they said, did you want to come to this? And then I read through the whole thing and I was like, you know what? This is really a good story. So stay on me. Don't give up on me. You know, just send me that email 2 or 3 times because I will read it. I will.
And I know a lot of us, I know me especially, I get my emails on my phone, all my work emails and stuff, so I can keep in touch with what's going on. So even if you're sending it on the weekends and stuff like that, I'm probably going to see it. And if it's something that, if it's, say, hey, you know, next month for our training we're doing this, go ahead and send it. You know, I may have to take a little bit to get, you know, like she said, you know, I'm going to forget probably, but, you know, follow up a little bit before, and they'll give us a chance to make sure that we have serious people to cover it, or whether or not we're going to turn around and say, hey, look, can y'all get a story on it? If you can get a story on it, send it to me. I mean, if you're putting on Divots is your friend, by the way. Make sure that you're getting your stories up there. They pull those for Army.mil, both of the sources that I go to on a regular basis to fill my newspaper. So the story will get out there, whether we're covering it or you're covering it. And don't worry about how you're actually doing your writing and stuff like that. I do copy edit, so I spend a lot of time doing that, matter of fact. But the big thing is let us know. You know, as long as you're giving us the information, I mean, we're going to make sure that your story gets out there. Yes, you know, like y'all heard from the last panel, that you know, there are times where it's the bad things that are going to go on, but we're just as happy, in fact, more so, covering all the good stories that are out there. And like I said, you know, like she said, you guys are volunteers. You have day jobs. This is something y'all do just because, you know, your love of your state, love of your country, and your fellow man. So these are stories that people love to hear about. And we've been more than happy to tell them. We just got to know about them.
Can I ask a question? On that note, since we're on the subject, so I think I know the answer, and maybe you can elaborate. So each organization is different, and most organizations have a news tips at NBC5.com. But then there's the personal context. So maybe you can kind of elaborate on how your organization works. Is it worth it to send that news tips, or do you want direct contact? And let's say I do send it to you, and you're busy, or you're unable to do it. What do you do to that if you're unable to cover it? Do you send it to the network or to the station? I mean, how does the individual? What's the best practices as far as contacting with that pressure?
And now I can say, you know, like from my side, like, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be the same one yours. We have an email that's like news@kdhnews.com. Basically, it's like a main email that everybody gets, so all of our editors will be able to see it. And a lot of times, you know, I may not be able to do something, but I'll be able to take to my other editors and say, hey, look, did you see this community coverage? Because if I'm not actually at work, then the editor that is at work is usually able to find somebody that can cover it, actually, you know, find a reporter or photographer, you know, somebody that can get out there and do it, or can let me know, hey, we're not going to be able to get anybody out there, so that we can get back to you and let you know. And like I said, I'm sure y'all did the same thing.
Yeah. I like it. I like when you send it to, you know, the KTBC News, the tip line, as well as me too. Because sometimes, you know, our assignment desk might, you know, be on lunch or something. But I have it too. So I just like for me to have it and then just based on stuff in the past, whether it's been some communication problems, if I have it, I know they have it, and then like that. That way you're covering all your bases and you're not going to be missed. So send it to the news desk and send it to me. My email's on the website too.
and it'll,
I would say with respect to the Statesman, the news tips at statesman.com is the best way to go because that email gets copied basically to all of the assigning editors. Like, I mean, it shows up in my inbox, it shows up in 10, 15 other people's inboxes. So that way, if I'm out for the week, there's 10 other people who are seeing it. Even other editors who maybe that's not their team that would cover that, but when we're in the news meetings, they'll say, "Oh, hey, did you guys see the email about this?" Like, it's your best way to reach everybody. And one other thing I'll say, because I know that y'all do a lot of your work on the weekends, and from the newspaper perspective, we are always looking for live, interesting events to cover on the weekends. And like Bridget was saying too, with newspapers, we like visual stuff too. We like things that we can have that nice big photo that runs on the front of the metro section. And so having live events that are going on, we like to come out and cover them. Having stories that are positive news stories. And also with newspaper, we like to be able to share positive news stories. So much of what we cover does tend to be, critical news, crime news, news about wrongdoing in government and things like that. So people are really hungry for positive news stories, and from the newspaper perspective, we want to tell them too. So the fact that you guys are doing things on the weekends, I think can really work to your advantage as far as there being people at the newspaper who can cover things on the weekends. We're looking for those stories. The staffing on the weekends also though tends to be lighter. It's usually a reporter that's a day shift and then a reporter on the evening shift. So if they're running around covering, 3 car accidents and shootings and stuff, they're not going to make it to your event, unfortunately, even though they might have initially planned on it. But a photographer might still make it out. Or if, things are, not blowing up with other breaking news, then they can come out and really, devote the time that your story deserves. So I would say, always make that pitch and try to get in the mix for the weekend events.
Well, speaking of weekends, David, how do the weekends, and Bridget, how does the weekends look for you when it comes to them sending press releases?
It's exactly the same way for me on the print side. I will say though, your biggest resource is right there. Your PAO at your Texas Military Forces can funnel so much because they've got the actual media list that's sent out to all the different media around the state. So if you get it to them, they can get it to us a lot quicker. Instead of trying to add like 15 different emails on your chain, because they usually have like a list that literally goes to all media, correct?
Every city we have a media list, so that's Austin, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio. We have a list of all the reporters in the beat that they cover. So if there is a certain story that you all want, you can just send it to PAO and we can kind of forward it out from there.
And they're going to be your biggest resource in making sure that we get the information. But for us on the weekends, it is the same. We do have fewer reporters that are working, but we also have stringers that we employ as well that we can try and get out there. So there's a really good chance that we'll be able to find somebody that can cover it. If not, again, that's where you guys can come in and get the story told still. But
yeah, just piggybacking on that, and I will say, I covered weekend. I was the weekend reporter for about 1.5 years when I first got here, and honestly, I love that shit, to be honest. But because Wednesday through Friday, I was doing a lot more negativity. They were saying just negative news. You get tired of people killing one another, and just on Saturday and Sunday, I got a chance to relax and breathe and do actually the stories I really loved. And then on top of that, I will say this: some of our biggest stories were on the weekends. They broke on the weekends. So don't take the weekend lightly. They're just going to brush it off for the weekend. If your story runs on the weekend, we get a lot of viewers. Sunday nights, people watch. We have on Fox 7 particularly, we have a large. We have a lineup on the weekends, a lot of sports, and our ratings will be really high on the weekends. So that's actually a prime opportunity, especially on Sunday after football, to get your story out there about what you do and what you're doing. So don't think it's like, oh, they just pushed me on Saturday. I like Saturday and Sunday stories. So yeah, just bring it up to us anyway.
So after they send the press release and they say they have more story ideas that they want to send you guys, what are some of the biggest issues you guys have run into pertaining to stories about the military?
On my part, my biggest problem at times is PAO.
What?
It's PAO, public affairs. Because, you know, especially on Fort Hood, they have to have an escort for us. We're gonna go out there, you know. I'm retired, so I can go out there if I wanted to, but if I'm gonna be doing an actual story, doing my job from a civilian perspective, then I need an escort. I have to go through public affairs. If they can't be available, then that makes it a little difficult for me to be able to, especially get on post to be able to do anything. If it's something that's out, you know, in the community, like out in Clean or something like that, then that's not an issue. But I still get nasty calls from a three-court PAO saying, why didn't we know about this story? Well, you know, Sam knows, you know, we've dealt with that before on a regular basis. That's my primary thing. You know, of course, if PAO knows what's going on, then it's usually not going to be an issue. But if they don't, then that makes covering things a little bit more difficult. So, but usually that's my biggest stumbling block is public affairs.
And I'd say my biggest stumbling block was, and maybe this is bad because it's just how we're trained, but broadcast is a lot different from paper. We don't read through everything off the top because we're usually looking for off the top what's the story about and will people care about it. I find myself, I will read through the whole press release, but that very first line, the PAO has to make me interested. And it has to make my boss, who's, you know, usually just not patient, to be honest, you know. But, you know, you gotta make me pitch that story, make me pitch it to where it will be covered. And a lot of times the press releases, the way they're written, is not very attention grabbing, you know. I'll continue to read through it, but I'm like, you know, what will our viewers care? Because our viewers care about military service, but what about this particular story? So just make sure you write those press releases with all your heart and mind as if you wanted it to get covered.
Just something along those lines, let me just throw out an example. One of the main functions of 90% of the State Guard is shelter operations. So when we're in training, we have people setting up cots, putting down blankets, pillows, and that's not very sexy. And so for us, this is part of our main mission. It is along those lines, one of the main missions that we have. And my question is, I keep looking at it going, how do I make that something that you guys are going to say, we want to do that, we want to
Numbers.
Huh?
Numbers is number one. Numbers is the number one thing. If you're going to be setting up, say, we're going out to, you know, like whenever you went out to Hurricane Harvey and stuff, we're going to be setting up 500 beds for people displaced by the storm. The numbers is what's going to catch everybody's eye. You know, or you're going out there and we're going to be setting up 2,000 cots and preparing to shelter and feed, 2,000 displaced Texans. The numbers is always going to be the number one, the first thing that catches our eye. Like, wow, they're going to go take care of 2,000 people.
If it's a training exercise, we're not, we can look ahead, let's say, and say if an emergency comes up, we'll be able to handle a particular shelter 2,000 beds.
Exactly.
So that would be something that would be more attractive to.
Exactly. We're going to be training to set up, say, 5 different shelter sites at different locations, and each shelter site can hold up to 500 people. So the numbers will always get you.
We don't have guns, we don't have big trucks, we don't drive through big floodwaters. And so what we're serving, the community and the state, but it's not sexy. So I was just trying to get some feedback from you all, how do we do that?
Right, and I think too, because to your point, the action itself is maybe not super scintillating, but that's where the human interest stories can be really important too. So the more that you know about the individual volunteers and what experience they bring to the table, why they're there, what this service represents to them, because they're not there because putting up cots is exciting either. I mean, they're there, there's something else motivating them to spend their weekends doing this. And if it's, they previously had some military service, and now this is helping them continue that mission in some way, or they had their own personal experience with a disaster and then felt like this was a way for them to give back, or something like that. Then we're getting into the realm of a human interest story that can really carry a narrative, not only for us, but for TV too.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback one more comment on that because it just sparked my memory. Partly, a lot of you all were out there on the ground. And right here in Central Texas, I don't know if you guys remember, we had a bunch of shelters in Austin. People were coming all the way from the Houston area to settle here, and I think it was the Tony Berger Center. It was a couple of places, the Delco Center, and I thought about when you said cots. That's what people were laying on. So when I walked in there and I talked to some of those people, their stories were horrific. But they were so happy that Austin cared enough to, and you guys were the ones who laid those cots down for them. It could be mundane. I'm just laying down a cot. But like she said, what you're doing for a mother and those kids, when I just walked in, I cried that day because there were children children at play, but they were in this gym. The children didn't even know the situation they were in. They didn't have a house to go back home to. So it's the bigger picture.
Okay.
I know you guys may not think it, it's just mundane, but it's not mundane what you do. People appreciate it. And especially when we have crises like Harvey. That was the epitome of a disaster. So, don't think it's nothing. Send it to us, even if it's a training exercise, because you never know when the next hurricanes come in. We might have to go to this again.
So with the media, there's good press and then there's bad press. Now, how do you all handle the bad press?
It really, really is going to depend on what the bad press is about. The State Guard, you're probably not going to see a lot of it, especially since you're volunteers. It's going to be more the National Guard or the regular Army that's going to see a lot more of the bad press, because quite frankly, we find out that somebody's a soldier that does something bad. As you can see, in recent news, you got the one veteran who decided to run over people in California, another one that decided to convert to Islam and wanted to go blow things up in Southern California. The first thing that they're going to say is it's an Army veteran, flat out, because they're going to, that's always going to be the first thing. We're going to, it's one of the things you got to look out for with, being active military or Guard or Reserve. On the State Guard side, you're less likely to see this, but the biggest thing that we'll ask is that, to be honest, if you ask for information, don't try and hide it. Because we're just going to make us dig in even more and go out and find it. And in a lot of cases, there are people like myself who are veterans. We know how to go out and dig up the information. And if it looks like you're not bothering giving us the information, the story is going to reflect that y'all are stonewalling, and it doesn't make you look good. So in a lot of cases, they just give us the information. I mean, if it's something that you can't give, such as like, certain people's names and stuff until like next to kin have been notified and everything else, we understand that. But whenever you can give us the information, do so. That is the number one way of as long as you got the information, the story's there and it's gone. But if we don't get the information, that story's going to last weeks, months, years. We're still talking about the LMTV accident on Fort Hood that killed the 13 because we're still getting stonewall information on that. So the story doesn't go away. If you want bad stuff to go away, give us the information. We report it, people read about it, and they forget about it. So that is my biggest thing. Just give us the information.
I think you touched on, I want to elaborate on that. So from our perspective, we need to understand that they've got bosses we need to, from our perspective, we need to understand that you guys have bosses. And your bosses are saying, I need the story, I need by 4 o'clock. And I need a quote from the general, I need this. We need to understand that they're being hounded. It's usually not the beat reporters that say, yeah, I'm going to create this deadline of 2 o'clock. So we need to understand that. And also, and as Colonel Lehan, who's the state PA years ago, said, it's about relationships. We've got to build up relationships with reporters. We need to make sure they understand, hey, I know you need this story, but you also need to know that I've got restrictions on what I can tell you. And if you build that rapport with them, say, hey, I'm doing my best to get you what I can. And you may not be able to give them everything they want or the specific, hey, the commander's busy with this. Hey, I got the XO, he might be able to talk about this. Okay, that's better than nothing. And so as long as you're building that rapport, make sure everyone understands each other's limitations. It makes for a great relationship between the military and the media.
Yeah, I would echo everything you just said. I think it's really important for you to develop some kind of rapport with whoever your local media outlets are in times of peace, in times when there's nothing on fire or any problems, because developing some sense of rapport, knowing they know you, you know them a little bit, then that really helps when there is a story that is sensitive or has limitations on it in some way. If you have a relationship with those local media outlets, then they understand that you're doing the best that you can to try to get the information you can. And even if you can't answer a question, if you can explain why. Like to David's point, well, we haven't notified some of the people yet, but once we have, we'll get you that information. Let the reporters know why you can't provide information and when you expect that you might be able to share that information at a later point if that's the case. And I think that, if there's like a specific thing that you can't answer, but you can provide sort of a more general answer about, well, here's the policy, here's what our rules are, even just giving that bit of context really helps.
I know for TV, and Bridget probably can speak to this, and you guys probably could too, there were many times in my career where I would go after the DA or say the chief of police or something like that if there was a story I was covering, and they would say, well, Brandon, we can't talk right now. And I said, well, Chief, listen, I'm going on at 5 o'clock, and I would hate to say the chief of police doesn't have any comment. So how do you deal with that when you get the, I don't have any comment, and you have to go on at like 5 for the 5 o'clock news?
Yeah, it's very deadline driven. All media have deadlines. And kind of what David and Bridget were saying, it kind of works like, we all have a job, right? So if the person that I'm trying to contact can respect the fact that I also have a job, and it's my job to disseminate information to the public, then if you kind of look at it like that, then it's not so rough to work together, if that makes sense. Because a lot of times in the past, even in my other job in Alabama, we would run into elected officials, and they have disrespect for media because they've been burned in the past. And the best way to approach it is just to understand that I'm also working on a deadline. And I'm very respectful about that too. And I know there's information that cannot always be given. But yes, I do hate to go on the air and say, I reached out to the chief and he didn't give me a comment. We don't want to say that. We want you to speak on it, because like David said, it just makes the situation worse when you just try to hide and you don't have a comment. And especially when it's a very sensitive topic or a horrific story that we don't necessarily want to report. We don't want to ruffle any feathers necessarily, but if it has to be disseminated, we have to do it, and we have a deadline. So yeah, I don't like saying there was no comment from the Texas military. The State Guard didn't comment on it. And then the viewers are like, well, I wonder why. It must be the viewers kind of put on Facebook. They talk on our Facebook. They say, well, that's shady. Why didn't it come out? Those comments are rough, and people will say that's a little sketchy. Why didn't they just at least put a statement out? At the very least, we'll take a statement, and Brandon knows that.
And that comes down to holding statements that, hey, this is going to sound bad, but we're not going to give them any specific information. But they're going to say, hey, this is just happening. We're looking into this. We take certain matters like this very seriously. I gave you zero information.
Thank you.
But
that was beautiful.
Yeah.
That's all you need to do. we're looking into the matter.
And let
We're-
people
you
know that you're actually doing something about it.
Versus they didn't have anything to say, the viewers were
Yeah, comments like that are perfect. I mean, you can just at least let us know, hey, look, we know about the situation. We're looking into it. We're actually trying to maybe say we're forming, an idea of what we need to do about it. Hey, that's perfect. You don't have to give us all that information that we're looking for immediately. But it lets us know, and it lets our readers or our viewers know that, hey, you are trying to do something about it, and that once the information is available, then we'll be able to pass that on to them. So that makes people happy for now. But as soon as you start not giving any information, not being able to be reached for comment, I have to put that in my story. And my managing editor is going to say, put it in the story. And it comes out, it does not make you look good
And that comes,
at all.
and that comes down to where the commander needs to have faith in us to say, hey, sir, hey, I'm going to put out a polling statement. It's going to be basically this. It's going to be nothing, but it's something. And they'll say, hey, PA, good, go with it. Run with it. It allows things to calm down. And then by the time the commander or whoever's in charge of the crisis or whatever, it gives them a chance, gives us a chance to prep him or her and get them ready to go.
And it's also something that John need to talk with those commanders about. Because if they're like, oh no, we're not going to give them anything, this is where y'all get, are able to say, look, this is the way it's going to make us look, and this is what they're going to run. So it gives that commander a chance to double think what he or she was going to do, and say, PL, run with that holder, comment, because again, we're going to, we have a deadline. And if we're going to get a story out, we're going to run exactly, they had no comment or whatnot, and it makes you look bad. So as long as y'all can let your commanders know, and you're also aware of being able to give at least something for us, then it allows us to make it a little bit more of a positive light, no matter what the incident is. So.
Yeah, I would just say one other thing about the holding comment. I think that's a great terminology for what that is, because it buys you time and it helps you through the first day of the news cycle, but there's going to be a second day, and none of us as reporters are going to forget about the story on that second day. We're still going to have the same questions that we had on the first day, and we understand that you needed some time to take stock of it, but we'll be back that second day asking those same questions. And there have been times, not with the State Guard, but with other agencies where, we come back that second day, that third day, we're asking the same questions, and they're still pointing to that first day statement, and that's not going to work. At some point, not only us, but our readers and viewers too. They ask these questions of us, and quite honestly, sometimes some of the comments will get kind of vicious toward us, like they think we're stupid that we didn't ask, or that we didn't wonder about these things. Like, no, we have the same questions as you. And that's part of the reason too why in our stories we'll say, we asked about this. It's unclear why this. No one could explain why this. And again, that just kind of adds to the pressure on us to be asking these questions of you guys.
Okay, so we covered press releases, we covered good press and bad press. Now we know every story is not going to make it on the front page of the paper or in TV. We would say the A block. So what kind of stories could they pitch that could make it on the front page of the paper or the first 10 minutes Bridget in TV?
In terms of getting on the front page of the paper, it's
tough.
That's
I
hard.
don't want to be most
But in terms of like Hurricane Harvey again, I know we talked about that already today, but that's kind of the pinnacle example. Being there on the ground in a major news event like that, and if you guys are deployed to another part of the state, the Austin contingent might be the best Austin angle for the Austin American Statesman on something that's happening across the state. So that could be a really good way for being that local angle that we would feature on the front page of the Statesman, even though it's a story that's happening in Corpus Christi or somewhere else. So reaching out to your hometown news organization, making sure they know what role people from that hometown are playing in that event somewhere else. If it's a big newsworthy event, I think that's probably your best foot forward on a story like that.
And mine's just a little bit different since we have such young, it's more military driven for us. If you're deploying somewhere, they're, mobilizing X number of people to go out to west Texas, say after the explosion out there. That right there, that'll be front page. It's like, X number of, Texas State Guardsmen are being mobilized to go assist here. Where do you come back? Homecoming. When it comes to our guardsmen, our National Guard, where we deploy a large contingent because, well, there's going to be people from our area that are probably a member of that unit that are going wherever. So deployments, homecomings, major events, brigade level or higher change of command, which they tend to forget to do for us as well. And like recently, where we did the new tag. Of course I was covered. I drove down here to interview Colonel Norris, or General Norris. She was a colonel, as our chief of staff when we deployed to Iraq, so, I happen to know her. But yeah, those are things that are going to be a big interest because of how much time that they spend on Fort Hood. I mean, 90% of them, at least the air assets, deploy out of Fort Hood, and almost everybody comes back to Fort Hood to demobilize. So it's a big interest in my area, but also know your area. Depending on where you're at, I mean, if it's in the Houston area or wherever, use that local angle. You got local members of the State Guard are being mobilized to do X, Y, and Z. And that gives that local angle that will put it on the front page for your first 10 minutes. Because as long as they're like local, like, hey, somebody from, Killeen, Texas is mobilizing with the State Guard to go to the border to provide, shelter for, migrant children, whatever, because it's somebody local. So that's the best way to pitch it for whichever area that you're going to be wanting to get the story at, is if there's somebody local in there, start with that angle, and I can put it on the front page.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. In general, right now, you mentioned in current events, look at that, and how can we tie that into someone right here in our area? So there's a whole issue with the border right now. That's a hot topic right now. So if we have guardsmen, if we have anyone from the State Guard going down to the border, that's immediately front page. That's the A block. It may not be the top, but it's the second story. It might be the top story that day. So, and then what we have to do is we have to have that human element, and that's why we keep saying it. Focus on a character, because we're telling the story, and we don't want it to just be kind of all over the place. We're going to hone in on one or two guardsmen, follow them around a little bit, ask why did you decide to, go down the border, why did you decide to join the Texas State Guard? And the thing I keep bringing up is the fact that, and I just found this out, that you guys are volunteers. Like, that isn't a story in and of itself. Like, I think I'm walking out of here with a story that probably will air next week, so I might be back, because that in and of itself it says a lot, and I think Mike Warren might want to probably even do a care course on that. But yeah, it's personal stories, it's our local people, and also another thing, it doesn't have to always be deployment or things of that sort. That's always a front page story. But I recently covered a story about a young man in I think he lived in Leander, and he couldn't get a transplant under his veteran health care. He was about to die before they finally passed legislation that was able to get him to that surgery that he needed. So we ran that in A block because it's a story that affects so many people here. The healthcare system, the VA system, those are stories as well. So if there's ever any issues regarding any of that, that can also run in our top story as well.
Thank you guys so much. We want to take any questions from the audience out here.
I actually got one. This is more for you. I used to work for Channel 10 up in Waco, Killeen area.
Okay.
So for some of us in the public affairs side, we're not all print journalists. So like David said, if I wrote a story and sent him photos, he'd edit it, put it in the paper.
Right.
I shoot a lot of video, and I put video stories together that maybe AFN will pick up. How do I get my video into your broadcast?
Oh yeah, definitely. What you do, you email our news desk, and I can give everybody that email today. You email that, and you export it in the probably the MOV file or whatever like that, and you say what it is, and what we do is we run it in our stories because video is so important. That's our medium, and a lot of times it sucks. We might miss a story, we might miss out on the event, and our viewers is who helps us half the time. And Brandon will tell you that we courtesy people for those videos. We put their name on there, say John Doe gave us this video. All types of stories. I've had a story that it was unfortunate, but it was road rage. I don't know if you guys remember. It was two men that got out of the car in the middle of the highway or a frontage road, and they were just fighting with these planks or bats. It was road rage going horribly wrong. But somebody captured it, and they emailed it to us because we weren't there. We didn't know what was going to happen. So the best thing to do is just go ahead and get it shot and get it emailed to us, and we will say this is my name and I shot it, and we'll explain. And then even try to get an interview with you explaining how you got the video, because we want to make sure we credit who it's due to. So yeah,
So-
immediately email.
so
it.
like for us, if
package
we-
though?
Yeah.
You're talking like a full packet, right? So-
Yeah, like a full package.
Oh, full
We-
package.
Yeah, so
Okay.
like we put together B-roll packages that,
Okay.
hey, here's all the information from this event. So like a couple years ago, I think we went to Germany, did some training out there, and I was putting B-roll, and the only place I would see it go is, Big Army would pick it up for DoD News, or AFM might pick it up, but I'm emailing the Divots links to the news stations. What can I do to make that more appealing for you to say, oh, Sergeant Sam DeLeon wrote this actual news package. It fits our parameters for being aired. What can I do to get you guys to pick it up and say, hey, Sergeant DeLeon did this story, here it is.
And let me tag on to that. Do you know what divots is?
No. Educate.
Okay, that's one thing I've always wondering as I was sitting here, is we pour our heart and soul in putting together these packages that we envision in our mind. Oh, when Fox 7 sees
Right.
this is just going to write itself. It's so incredible, all these
Yeah.
clips we've put together in this B-roll package, and we create a slate that we say, man, this lays it all out. Every question will be answered. They'll have everything they need here to make the most incredible news story. But we give it to them, and then Divot says that they market it to our area, and we tell them what area. We tell them different agencies. We'll put a list in there of all these things, and we just wondered if you even knew what that was.
Right. Well, see, this is why we're having this right now. I didn't know. So a lot of times you guys are recording kind of just some of the things you assigned. Is that what this is?
Yeah,
You're,
just like random
keeping-
training, like you said.
Yeah.
We'll go different states and do training. I've been to
Right, and
Utah,
you keep
Germany,
record of all that.
Lithuania. Put all that together, and then I put it on Divot, and then I never see or hear from it again.
So
Finish the process.
So the first rule is don't rely on Divot's marketing. So what I learned actually when Sergeant Scobell and I were deployed, it's a platform, and we'll make sure y'all see it. So it's a platform, and one of the things marketing, and you can type in there, market to the President of the United States. You can market to Killeen, Texas.
Yeah.
Well, they'll look at that, or they may look at it, but they're also going to look at what the news day looks like. All right, how many stories have they already sent out or are going to send out? So at Divots, they make decisions based on the news cycle. All right, is that really a statewide, is that really a nationwide story? Okay, probably not, so we're just going to market to Texas. So that's one thing. And we keep on going back to Harvey because it was a huge case study, especially for us, from marketing perspective. So what they train at Defense Information School is a standard process of you put together B-roll, you do all this stuff, you put it up there, and then you send out a press release. And with Harvey, that went out. That process that they teach military PAOs went out the window, right? Because if you try to put together a B-roll package, that's full of divots, then you send out a press release, and that market, which is heavily saturated with all these things going on, if you want to get on Fox News or CNN or MSNBC, it's going to go up to New York or DC, and it's going to sit there, and they're so bogged down, they don't know what they got. So what we end up doing, down on Interstate 410, and forget about your fancy camera equipment. That we're so behind the times on, and we're getting new stuff. But that footage you saw up there, that's cell phone footage.
Yeah.
And it was good quality stuff, and we put up on Divots. and I literally marketed directly to the reporters and producers on the scene. Because if that goes up to DC or New York, it's never gonna move super wide today in such a heavily saturated market. But if you give it, hey, producer, I've got this story, I've got this video footage of National Guard troops out there in that neighborhood. You do? And my initial reaction was, well, we can't take that. Okay, well, here's the link to Divots. Oh, it's on Divots? Oh, we can take Divots. Because they won't take, I mean, you talked about emailing
Right.
footage. A lot of news outlets won't take it because they don't know if it's credible, especially I think at the national level. But they know, at the national level, they do know Divots. And they know that if it's on Divots, it's been vetted by the military process. So that direct link was critical, especially in that heavily saturated market. Go direct to the source.
Yeah.
She's the one that, these guys are the ones that
Let
want
us
the
know.
story.
Let us be aware.
Not
I
necessarily
will say,
watch
when it
it.
comes to divots too, a lot of, especially if they don't have military experience, have no idea what divots is. I've got a divots account.
I did before I
Because-
started here.
Yeah.
I never heard of it.
So
Yeah.
they've never heard of it, so, but a lot of their bosses do know what it is. So, but again, send directly to. If you see that there's somebody that's listening to this, writing about it, doing video on it, go find their email address on the website.
So
Yeah.
still upload to Divots, but you gotta make that direct contact.
Send
Don't
the
rely
link,
on Divots
even
to
if the link
market.
to
It's worthless.
Divots to
Yeah, and, a lot of them, if they don't have divots accounts, once they start seeing it, and they're able to, they'll make accounts, so they'll be
Oh, I'll
able to
make an
access
account
it. Yeah, you had a question back there?
We'll take one more question.
Two things. One, we recently had annual training. TMD sent out a press release probably about 3-4 weeks before annual training. It went into everybody's spam. Was never seen. I call up, try to get people out there. We had a pretty big mission out at Lake Bastrop. We never saw it. So we had no media out there. The one day we needed them out there, they showed up the next day, it was torrential downpours, things were canceled. So, one, how do we get around the spam deal? And two, just, it'd probably be more for TV than print. I come from a radio background, I'm probably the only one in here that's radio broadcasting. Nope. Speaking over, that's it, TV, get out. In radio, we're required by law 30-minute PSA program every week. Now I know TV is supposed to do that. It's usually on at dark 30 in the morning. We're doing a real big recruiting push. How can we help get? Because we have no money. We're all volunteers. We don't get paid unless the governor says you're gone. So how can we avail ourselves of those PSA time slots where we can get maybe our general or somebody who can help explain what the State Guard is on TV?
Right. And that can be a combination of answers actually, because for
Give me the best one.
Yeah. No, I think that it will be kind of like a push here because number one, I would want to get a story on you first, so that will air in our newscast in general. So once I air a couple of stories about you, that kind of orients the public on who you are first of all. And then on top of that, if I can talk with our GM or our people in programming for those slots, they can probably find a way to get that 30-second PSA explaining who you are. So not only do you have just the PSA, but you also have a package running in the 5, 9, and 10 o'clock show, and then we post it on social media too, which is also a big deal. That's where a lot of people get their news these days. I think you guys are going to talk about that in the next panel, but it's a combination of things. So yeah, if you get with me, I can go up to our programming, and we can figure out how we get that PSA on the air, and at the same time running a couple of packages on the Texas State Guard. I think that's the best approach to it because it's everywhere at that point in TV. So that's my approach.
We can recruit you and make it real easy.
Or that. But print, maybe did print.
From my side, it's easy enough. If y'all send me the information, I'll print it. As long as y'all give it to me. The biggest thing that we run into is the fact that we don't know. And for me personally, you can send it to my direct email, or you can send it to our main news email, and I'll
That's
see
where it
it.
goes to spam now. when we do the news at whatever.
And if that's going to spam, then, I'll make sure y'all have my email and you can send it to me directly. And of course, it all depends on what account you're sending it from,
Which usually our TXSG.
And
We don't
those I
have a
usually
dot mil,
receive.
we have a dot state, dot
Yeah.
US.
Yeah, I get a lot of those because I do get a lot of stuff from from the state. So, I will get them.
Yeah, and then going back to the pitch itself, I don't know how you phrased what you sent, but, just to emphasize whatever you can about the training itself that's interesting or newsworthy, because just having a training may not grab people's attention, but if you say, we're going to have 300 people training, or we're going to have people doing, working on a new, some new equipment. This is the first time we've gotten a chance to use this equipment that does whatever. Or this is our last training before we deploy to somewhere, that's interesting, going to grab people's attention. So to the extent that you can pull out some of that stuff and lead off with that at the top, that can also help, pique the attention of whoever you're sending it to.
All right.
I love that word.
Just a quick comment, I know we gotta stop.
We're running out of time.
I know, I just wanna thank y'all for, what you do. I do know Rudy Koski has covered us
Yeah.
a number of times, and, what we do because we love doing what we do, but we are going to get better with, trying to find, I think you kind of touched on it, some of the buzzwords are the biggest, the first, you gotta have some things as a hook, and we do a lot. I'd probably put it at about half of the 90% are shelters. The rest of it, we have a medical brigade. We do Operation Lone Star in the Valley. We have an engineering brigade that during Hurricane Harvey is mostly civil engineers, and they literally for free, some of these very small municipalities with like 300 citizens, they don't have the money for to go hire engineering firms to decide if their water treatment plant is now up to snuff. We have engineers that are doing that for part of the service that that we provide. The woman whose sister drowned in Wimberley, we sent people down the weekend after to do search and rescue for their kids. We do a lot of things that we need to do a better job of telling our story than what I call mission-ready packages. We had a boat team that literally saved the life of a Texas game warden who had his femur slashed in a boat, and our 2 people rescued that game warden and literally saved his life before he bled out. So a lot of things go on in the State Guard, and we need to do a better job of telling that story. Thank you.
All right. That's it. Thank you guys for coming in. We appreciate it.